let's go and talk about how to take better notes. Because I remember when I was a student, I was not a very good note taker. My notes would be completely messed up. And even though I could listen to my teacher, I understood what was going on in class. I remember coming home and looking over my notes. What did I write down? I thought I understood what went in class, but then when I went to try to do the work, I tried to understand my notes. It didn't make any sense. Unfortunately, there was not a lot of advice on how to take notes. The best advice up to that point was just write down what the teacher was writing on the board. I was kind of lost as a student. And I improved on my note-taking abilities by learning some things that kind of work for me. And those are some things I want to share with you guys in this video. Some other things that I think really changes once I became a teacher. When I became a teacher, I kind of fell into the way that I was taught. Even though we have training and we go through all these educational courses, you a lot of times just kind of fall back on what you're used to. I did kind of go through a growth of how did I want my students to absorb the information in class? I started off with this very traditional approach of writing down a lot of stuff on the board, having my students copy it. I quickly kind of remembered myself as a student and realized that method did not work for me. Even though there are some students might prefer that, they just want to show up to class, get the notes, and get out of there. Those students a lot of times would be vocal against doing any other kind of note taking. But what I found was that's not the best use of our time inside the classroom. I want to be doing some math, helping you answering questions and investigating, engaging, and practicing. I don't want to be spending our time in class, you just recopying stuff that I write down on the board. So I had to change my approach to teaching. And this video is 4 ways that you can improve your note-taking ability. Mostly going to be geared towards math, but can be applied for any class that you are taking. The first thing comes down to something that is universal about everything, coming in prepared for the class. I know a lot of times we come into class, we're all right, class, I'm going to learn. So I'm just going to sit down and see what's going to happen for the day. There's very low lift. You can just show up and start writing down notes. It's easy. You don't have to think about it. And a lot of times it helps you get through the day. But if you want to become somebody that's really, really good at taking notes, one of the most important things you can do is be prepared. Go back and review what you had previously done in the class. Don't just show up and just all right, time to learn. Go back, look back through your notes. Go back and look ahead. Look at the book that you're having. See what the current topic and what the professor or what you are going to be looking at. A lot of times you're going to have a syllabus, so you know what content you are going to be doing. A lot of the stuff you might already know offhand, or it's going to connect to stuff that you previously did. So go ahead and review over that content. It doesn't take a lot of time. This can be something that can be anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 minutes of just a little bit of prep work. Not only take better notes, but also absorb the information. So as you are inside class, you kind of know what to expect, what's happening. You also kind of have a little bit of context of what your teacher is teaching inside the classroom. You're going to be able to add that context or those connections down in your notes. When you kind of forget that, write down the content, but it doesn't really make sense. You don't really know how it relates to anything that you were doing. When you have some time to do some prep work, take advantage of that. The next thing that I think is really important, that I think is very difficult for a lot of students. One thing that I had to do is I remember I had a student that had IEPs. They would require on their IEP was to have pre-filled notes. So notes already prepared. I just kind of winged it. I knew what I was going to teach. I had my problems and I would just go up there and teach. And that was good. But then when students had an IEP or students were hey, we're going on vacation for 2 weeks. Can you send us over the notes? I was crap, I don't have all of this prepared. And so that's when I started coming up with my pre-calculus course, and let's just create all these notes and let's have them available for the students. If you can, even if that may be the case, you can kind of go back to, section 1 and kind of creating an outline, maybe even having some of the notes. You can have anything downloaded or pre-filled or anything else that you don't have to write vigorously what's going down in the class. I think what can be really important, sometimes about that is even teaming up with somebody else inside your class that can maybe focus on one part of the notes, and then you can focus on another part of the notes, which I'm going to get to next. So therefore, you kind of have the core content that hopefully should be always provided ahead of time that you can download and already have with there. And therefore, then you can focus on some of the intricacies of what the teacher is saying and trying to go ahead and adding in that context. Because I think it's really important that we fall into this trap of whatever the teacher is writing down the board, we want to be able to write down. But I think the most important thing is when the teacher is writing things down on the board, you want to be listening. You don't want to be spending your time always having to be writing things down. If there's anything that you can have to already have down in your notes, for when the teacher is doing their teaching, they are writing stuff on the board or writing a definition, you already have it written down. Therefore, you can be present in the moment. Because I found a lot of times when I was a student, I would drift off. I would daydream and things would get boring, especially in a math class. And I think it's really important to be present. And one of those best ways to be present is reviewing the previous notes and what's coming up, but to also have some things already pre-filled. So if you have blank notes that you can kind of work with, I think that's really important to be able to take better notes. So those are going to be the first 2 things. Now, the next thing that is really important that I found out when I was in college, I would always go ahead and do my homework, and I'd always go back and review my notes because your brain can just be like a mush. Even if you do everything that I said in step number 1 and step number 2, your brain can just be like, you feel overwhelmed. You go back and review those notes because I guarantee you there's going to be some things that you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Let me go ahead and maybe write in some extra things onto this of what I remember the teacher saying that I didn't have time to write that down. Take a little break, but trying to go back because I guarantee you can add some things to those notes to make you remember and understand what it is just happened in class, because class can sometimes be overwhelming, as I mentioned. And the last thing that I don't think is as important to do immediately, but I think it is really important for those of you that are coming up with like exams, and you want to do your homework and you're getting ready for your test, is to rewrite your notes. I love one thing I talk about was creating the cheat sheets, and that is taking all of your notes and condensing them down to one sheet of paper. That is great, and many students love it, but that might not be something you want to do. But I do think if you can go back through your notes, at least once or twice, when you're kind of reviewing them every year, sometimes I remember we had I was in high school and we were done with our junior or something, and we had a bonfire at the end of the year. And I remember some people were taking their notebooks and throwing them in the fire. And it was all this fun, yeah, school's over, we're done, summer's here. And all this notes and all this knowledge was just thrown in the fire. Dang you, school, we're done with you. And which is cool, which is funny, right, at the time. But then I kind of thought about it. I was like, in this digital age, and obviously content is much more prevalent now in the internet, but I was like, go back and go through your notes. You're going to sell them. And maybe you can. I know there's online websites where you can sell your notes. And immediately, if I looked at my notes that I took during class, they would not be something that I could charge a good, pretty penny for. However, I know a lot of people that put in a lot of time into organizing their notes and making them really good notes that would benefit other students. And so I kind of go through this mindset of when you take your notes, that's fine, that's for you. But if you can rewrite your notes, if you can re-summarize your notes, maybe for a cheat sheet, I think that's great. Or if you don't want to condense them all that way, but you just want to be able to rewrite them and present them as something that you would particularly sell, even if you're not going to sell them, just going through the process of rewriting, condensing, and summarizing your notes, making them much more presentable. There's no trick that I can obviously give you, just immediately you're going to take better notes. But I truly believe if you are prepared for note taking, if you have that mindset, if you've reviewed everything, if you have immediate content already written down, or maybe if you split your notes with somebody else and they take that content and you can write them down and you guys combine your notes, if you summarize your notes immediately and then go ahead and condense them and review them right afterwards, that can make you a better note taker. And so I hope this advice you guys can use to become better at note taking. And if you have any other tips that you have used or that you have seen other people have success with, let me know down in the chat down below, because I'm interested to hear what you guys came up with.